The rhythmic sound of drumsticks clicking against each other echoed through Mr. Tanaka's garage. The once quiet evenings that Kai Yamato had spent at his family's apartment now had a new soundtrack, one of steady beats, sharp crashes, and the deep resonance of a bass drum. Each session in the garage was a revelation for Kai, who had never thought of himself as a drummer until now. The garage wasn't much to look at, cluttered with old tools, cans of paint, and dusty car parts. But to Kai, it felt like a sanctuary. The drum kit itself was old but sturdy, its scuffed cymbals and faded drumheads carrying the marks of countless songs. Mr. Tanaka had told him the kit used to belong to his younger brother, who had played in a band years ago. "It's been sitting here for ages," Mr. Tanaka had said with a laugh during Kai's first session. "But it looks like it's found a new purpose now." Kai's lessons were informal, almost playful. Mr. Tanaka wasn't a professional teacher, but he had an ear for rhythm and a patient approach that made learning fun. "All right, let's start with the basics," Mr. Tanaka said one evening, handing Kai the drumsticks. "We'll keep it simple, one hand on the snare, one foot on the bass pedal. Like this." He demonstrated a basic beat, tapping the snare with his right hand and pressing the bass pedal with his foot in a steady rhythm. Kai followed, his movements clumsy at first. His hands and feet didn't seem to want to work together, and the drumsticks slipped from his grip more than once. "Don't worry," Mr. Tanaka said, chuckling. "It's all about coordination. You'll get the hang of it." Bit by bit, Kai improved. After a few weeks, his once halting beats had smoothed into a steady rhythm. The thrill of creating something so immediate and powerful filled him with a sense of accomplishment he hadn't felt in a long time. At school, Kai's newfound passion for drumming remained a secret. He hadn't told anyone, not even his classmates, about the hours he spent practicing in Mr. Tanaka's garage. Part of him liked having this part of his life to himself. It felt like something that was truly his, untouched by the expectations or judgments of others. But as much as he tried to keep it hidden, the energy he carried from his sessions began to show. His feet tapped under his desk during lessons, and he found himself drumming on any surface he could find: his thighs, his books, even the edge of his chair. "Yamato, stop that," one of his teachers said during a particularly boring history class. "This isn't a music room." Kai quickly folded his hands in his lap, trying to suppress a grin. At home, Kai's parents began to notice the change in him, too. "You've been coming home late these days," Akio said one evening as the family sat down for dinner. "Where have you been?" Kai hesitated, glancing at Marissa. He hadn't told his parents about the drums yet, unsure of how they would react. "Just at a friend's place," he said, avoiding eye contact. Marissa raised an eyebrow but didn't press further. She could tell something was different about her son. He seemed lighter, more confident, even if he wasn't ready to share what was on his mind. One evening, as Kai packed up his things after a session, Mr. Tanaka handed him an old notebook. Its pages were yellowed with age, filled with handwritten notes and sketches of drum patterns. "This belonged to my brother," Mr. Tanaka explained. "He used it to write down all his ideas when he was starting out. I think you might find it useful." Kai flipped through the pages, his eyes widening at the intricate rhythms and notes scrawled across the paper. "Are you sure I can have this?" he asked. "Of course," Mr. Tanaka said with a smile. "It's better in your hands than gathering dust here." The notebook became Kai's new treasure. He spent hours poring over it, practicing the patterns and adding his own notes in the margins. One day, as Kai was finishing a particularly tricky rhythm, Mr. Tanaka leaned against the wall and watched him with a thoughtful expression. "You know," he said, "you've got real talent, Kai. Have you thought about playing with other musicians?" Kai looked up, startled. "Other musicians? Like, in a band?" "Yeah," Mr. Tanaka said. "Drumming's great on its own, but it really comes alive when you're playing with others. I've got a friend who runs a community center nearby. They've got a jam session every Friday. You should check it out." The idea both excited and terrified Kai. He had never played with other people before, and the thought of putting himself out there was daunting. But deep down, he knew he wanted to try. That Friday, Kai walked into the community center with his heart pounding. The sound of guitars, keyboards, and drums filled the air, a chaotic blend of melodies and rhythms that made the space feel electric. "Hey, you must be Kai," a man in his 20s said, walking up to him with a friendly grin. "Tanaka-san told me about you. I'm Hiroshi. You can set up over there." Kai nodded, his hands trembling slightly as he set up the borrowed drum kit. As the other musicians started playing, he listened carefully, trying to find his place in the sound. When it was his turn to join in, he hesitated for a moment, then tapped out a steady beat. At first, it felt awkward. His rhythm didn't quite match the others. But as he relaxed, the music began to flow. By the end of the night, Kai was grinning from ear to ear. The jam session had been messy and imperfect, but it was exhilarating. For the first time, he felt like he was part of something bigger than himself. That night, as he lay in bed, Kai thought about how far he had come. Just a few months ago, he had felt lost, unsure of his place in the world of music. But now, with the drums, he felt like he was finally finding his rhythm, both literally and figuratively. He didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long while, he was excited to find out. Kai's newfound confidence in drumming opens the door to new opportunities and challenges. As he continues to explore this path, he begins to realize that the world of music is bigger and more complicated than he ever imagined.